before the brain does. Blue lights on Mobile Avenue. Blue lights on Mobile Avenue. Everybody know before the brain does. The shoulders tighten, the hands find the wheel, the breath goes shallow. This is the information that lives in the muscle, not the mind. South Coast body knowledge, inherited and updated. I was 23 with a job in the car, nothing to hide. I want that said first, nothing to hide, because it matters. That the stop found nothing, that the stop was fishing, that the stop was a stop that the neighborhood had been preparing me for since I was 12. My father said, hands where they can see them speak when spoken to. Say sir, say yes sir, say no sir, say only what answers the question. Don't explain, don't argue, don't reach for anything without narrating. He said it like a prayer, like if I learned the words right, the prayer would protect me. Hey. Blue lights on Mobile Avenue, everybody knows. Everybody knows. Every black man on the street has a sequence somewhere in his spine. A sequence that begins with the lights and ends with outcomes that are decided in the seconds before you have any information. The officer was young, younger than me. Maybe that surprised me, the youth of him, the nervousness underneath the authority. Two nervous people on Mobile Avenue at 11 p.m. One of them with a badge and a gun in the legal weight of the state. He asked where I was coming from. I told him. Asked where I was going. I told him. Asked for license and registration. My hands moved slowly and with narration because my father's voice was in my hands before I was. What the stop cost? 40 minutes, a search of the car. The humiliation that comes with a search that finds what you said it would find, nothing. The knowledge that the probable cause was my face on Mobile Avenue, and the knowledge that this knowledge is inadmissible in any proceeding. Blue lights on Mobile Avenue, everybody knows. Everybody knows. The feeling of being the probable cause before the investigation, of being the hypothesis that the state tests against itself, using your body as the instrument of its own self-confirmation. I want to tell you the officer was a monster. It would be simpler, but he was not a monster. He was a system in a uniform, a system that decided before he was trained at certain faces on certain streets at certain hours with a probable cause of things. I drove away with my license and my record intact, and the 40 minutes and the knowledge I could not shake, and the understanding that my father's prayer worked tonight, and the understanding that prayer is not a policy and the night is not always. Blue lights on Mobile Avenue, everybody knows before the lights, what the lights will require, knows that the correct answer is compliance, not because compliance is just, but because the alternative is a verdict reached before the courtroom convenes. I got home at midnight and sat in the car for 20 minutes, not because I was afraid anymore, because I was angry, and anger and a black man in a car on a South Coast street in 1994 requires management before it can be brought inside. My father asked if I was alright when I finally came in. I said yes, because yes was what the moment required, and because no was an answer that would have required the conversation. Neither of us had the language for yet. Blue lights on Mobile Avenue, that's the South Coast in the 90s in a 4-word sentence. That's the thing that happens and keeps happening and gets absorbed into the body and becomes part of how the body moves forever. Blue lights on. Third Ward Friday. Third Ward Friday. Third Ward Friday, yeah. Third Ward Friday is different than any other night in Houston. The week has been pressing from every direction, and the night is the exhaust valve. Everybody on Almeda Road is carrying Monday through Thursday, and Friday's where you put it down, or where it push it down. The club's open at 9, but the parking lot opens at 7. That's where the real Third Ward Friday happens, and a lot. Music out of somebody's trunk, somebody's cousin brought the cooler. The kind of free that costs something by morning. I ran with Calvin and them on Third Ward Fridays for 3 years. Calvin who worked the warehouse on navigation Tuesday through Thursday, and became something else entirely when the weekend unlocked him. Not a bad man, a pressurized man who found his release valve in the wrong fuel. The price of Third Ward Friday is not always paid on Friday. Sometimes you pay it on Saturday when the call comes. Sometimes you pay it 3 years later when the pattern becomes the verdict, and the verdict lands in the courtroom where Friday night is the only evidence. Third Ward Friday, the South Coast letting this pressure go. Third Ward Friday, everybody spending what they saved all week. Third Ward Friday, before you know what the night is charging. Third Ward Friday, before the bill arrives a Sunday morning. Kenny Lee got shot you this on a Friday in October 95. I was there, not near it, but there in the parking lot when it happened. The sound of it was smaller than the movies make it sound, and the consequence of it was larger than anything the movies have ever made. Kenny Lee was 26 with a daughter in a plan. The plan was making enough at the refinery to get out of Third Ward. The plan was not complicated. It was the plan that half the Third Ward had, and the plan required staying alive until the plan could execute. The price of Third Ward Friday is sometimes that the plan doesn't execute. It's sometimes that the release valve becomes the rupture. It's sometimes a 26-year-old man in a hospital parking lot and a daughter growing up with a theory of what her father was. I don't wanna romanticize the Friday. The Friday was real. I don't wanna condemn the Friday. Friday was also the only breathing room. I wanna name the pressure that made the Friday necessary, and name the system that built the pressure that made the Friday what it called. Third Ward Friday. Out the South Coast letting this pressure go. Third Ward Friday. Everybody spending what they saved all week. Third Ward Friday. Before you know what the night is charging. Third Ward Friday. Before the bill arrives and nobody's ready. The bill for Third Ward Friday is written by the conditions that made the Monday through Thursday what they were. And the conditions were built by decisions made in rooms that never knew a Third Ward Friday, never needed one, never understood. Calvin is still in Houston. I heard he found the church eventually, found what Friday couldn't give him inside a Sunday morning institution. I don't know if that's a redemption or just a different door into the same need that Third Ward Friday used to address. The price of Third Ward Friday is all of this, the whole ledger. The Kenny Lees and the Calvins and the daughters without fathers, and the men who found their way to Sunday and the ones who didn't, and the parking lots that still hold the sound of what cost us. Third Ward Friday. We needed it because the week was what the week was. Third Ward Friday. The South Coast taking one breath before the next. Third Ward Friday. The price was real and so was the need, and I can hold both of those truths without needing one of them to win. What the Ninth Ward? The Ninth Ward. Yeah. The Ninth Ward buries on Tuesdays. That's what I noticed. Not Saturdays, not ceremonially, not with all the flowers. Tuesday is when the quiet comes, when what was lost gets placed into the ground without enough people to properly witness. What the Ninth Ward buried on a Tuesday. In October 1994, Marcus from the domino game, from the Saycloth peacekeeping, 2 bullets entering from behind at the corner of Claiborne and Desire in a Tuesday funeral that 4 people could afford to attend. The preacher said he was going somewhere better. I've heard that enough times to know it's what you say. When the place you're going from has been so hard that anywhere else becomes paradise by comparison. What the Ninth Ward buried on a Tuesday. The futures that lived inside the men before the men became the statistics. Derrick's maps, Marcus's peacekeeping, Jerome Campbell's 20 years, the plans that didn't survive the mathematics of the 90s South. I have been keeping this list for 30 years. I have been keeping it in the way that survivors keep lists. Not for organization, not to share at a seminar about policy, but because the names require a keeper and I am available. What the Ninth Ward buried on a Tuesday. The version of itself that the outside world never photographed. The version that had Mr. Earl's hands on engines at 7 in the morning before the engines and Mr. Earl in the morning all went somewhere else. I keep waking up in the night and adding names to the list. Names I didn't know I remembered until the dark brought them back. The way the Ninth Ward dark brings things back, not as ghosts, but as facts that the daytime doesn't have room to process. The city buried them on Tuesdays, quietly, with insufficient attendance. The policy that shaped their dying was debated on Thursdays in committee rooms. The legislation that created the conditions was signed on a Friday with a statement about strengthening communities and fighting crime. What got buried with them is the story that explains the burial. The story that begins in Washington and ends on Claiborne and Desire. The story that has names at both ends, names of the dead and names of the deciding. And we know both sets of names, and one set is in a cemetery, and one set is not. The Ninth Ward buries what it buries, and it buries more than bodies. It buries the futures attached to the bodies, buries the children those bodies would have raised different. secretly buries the peacekeeping that kept the Tuesday quiet from arriving sooner. Tuesday in the 9th Ward in October. The humidity's still there even in October. Still pressing, the kind of air that tells you nothing ever fully clears. That what happened yesterday is still in the atmosphere today. What the 9th Ward buried on the Tuesday is not over. It's not in the past in the way that past is supposed to mean contained. It is in the air, in the bodies of the ones who stayed, in the children who grew up breathing what the 9th Ward buried and calling it weather. I am one of those children. I breathed it and called it weather. I am one of those survivors keeping the list. And the list is not long enough. The list will never be long enough, because what got buried was not just individuals. It was possibility itself. What the 9th Ward buried on a Tuesday. I am still writing the full inventory. And the inventory is still growing. And the Tuesday is still arriving. And arriving. And arriving. And arriving. Yeah. 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 The welfare office on Broad Street doesn't open till late. The line starts forming at 6:30 in the summer heat. Miss Yvonne has been standing since 6:15. A good dress on, because showing up proper is a kind of armor. The form asks for name, address, number of dependents, asks for proof of income. The form doesn't know how to read no income. Asks for the father's information, as if the father's whereabouts or something a woman in this line shows, and not something that happened.
What the welfare office didn't ask.
How many nights you budgeted sleep instead of dinner? How many times you told the children the gas was broken, when the truth was the bill and the bill had won this month?
What the welfare office didn't ask.
What it cost to get to this office from Florida Avenue? Bus fare times 2, times 4 children, times every visit. The math of getting to the place that's supposed to help you. The caseworker has a desk and a quota and a training. The training is in eligibility, not in the faces. Miss Yvonne has been doing this for 7 years, and the caseworker is 23 and doing her best, which isn't the same thing. I'm not blaming the caseworker.
That's too easy.
The caseworker is also somebody's daughter, also underpaid, also working a system that wasn't designed to actually solve what it addresses. Designed instead to process, to manage, to contain the quarterly numbers.
What the welfare office didn't ask.
What happens to a family when the check doesn't stretch to the 15th? What a mother's face looks like at 12:30 on the 14th, when the refrigerator makes its honest report and there's nothing to dispute.
What the welfare office didn't ask.
What Yvonne was before the 9th Ward named a case number. She was a woman with a degree she never finished, because the money to finish it went to a funeral she never planned. 1996 and the welfare reform came through Congress, called it ending welfare as we know it. The president said it with a smile. Time limits on assistance, work requirements that assumed that the jobs existed and the child care existed and the buses ran on time. The 9th Ward knew the buses didn't run on time. The 9th Ward knew the child care waiting lists were 18 months long. The 9th Ward knew that a 5-year clock on survival doesn't know anything about the actual length of hard times. Miss Yvonne got off the bus on Broad Street at 6:47. Stood in line until 8, sat in a plastic chair until 10:15. Answered questions for 11 minutes about the life she was living, and left with the determination and the bus schedule and nothing resolved.
What the welfare office didn't ask. What she's gonna feed for children tonight. What she's gonna tell them when they ask why the lights are low. What she's gonna do when the 5-year clock runs out and nothing has changed.
This is the pressure that doesn't make the news. Not dramatic enough, no single villain, no clean cause in effect. Just a woman in a good dress at 6:30 in the summer, standing in the line that the country built to make her prove she deserves to eat.
White sand between my gator, Gulf wind on a suit that costs more than your ring. I didn't come from money, I came from knowing that the South Coast don't forgive ignorance. Three-piece linen, cream and bone, the color of something that survived a long summer. Hatcock low, the way my daddy wore his before the factory took everything except the posture. I learned to move slow where other men rush. Slow is how the bayou teaches patience. Fast men get wet, slow men stay dry. I watched the Gulf for years before I stepped in. White sand and crocodile leather, that's the outfit for the South Coast summer. Ain't nothing faking what I carry. Every piece of it calls something real. Mississippi morning, 30 miles from the casinos, the kind of quiet that lives between one lie and the next. I know every back road between New Orleans and Pensacola, every motel that keeps the reggae street light. Miss Gloria runs the desk at the Bayside on Tuesdays. She sees me coming and she doesn't ask questions. Just pulls the key from the board behind her head and slides it across without making it a conversation. That's the economy of the South Coast life. Everyone knows their part, nobody names the arrangement. The pelicans know, the shrimp boats know, the azalea bushes on Mobile Bay know what blooms in this soil. White sand and crocodile leather, that's the banner under which I walk. I built this from reading people like weather, in the South Coast weather will talk. Raymond used to say the game is in the posture, not the words, the way you enter a room, the way you let the room come to you, instead of chasing it like a man who needs something. I took that and built a cathedral of composure, raised it brick by brick on Gulf Coast foundation. The humidity here doesn't bend you, it tests you, and everything I wear is testimony I pass. There's a version of this life that the music talks about loud and fast, expensive and wrong in all the ways that shine. I choose the quiet version, slow moving Gulf Coast humid, where the arrangement holds longer because nobody has to force it. White sand and crocodile leather, I walk the shore like I own the tide. Not because I do, because the posture is everything. And the Gulf Coast taught me how to ride. From Houston to the Bayou Mouth, from the Bayou Mouth to the Florida line. I carry the South Coast gospel in the leather of my step, in the cut of what I choose to wear when the stakes are mine. White sand beneath the gaiters, Gulf above the collar of my linen. I am the product of a patient education that the South Coast gives to those who listen. Yeah. South Coast gives to those who listen. Oh.
When the Bayou calls collection, every debt comes due. Yeah. South Coast don't run tabs forever. What you owe is what you do. What you do, what you do, what you do. The arrangement holds as long as everyone holds their end. And when somebody slips, the Bayou calls collection again. Hey, know the brass on the back row, second line for the falling. Collection time on the Gulf Coast, no exceptions, no stalling. Pay what you owe, pay in other ways. The coast decides. When the Bayou calls collection, there's nowhere on this strip to hide. Antoine thought he could run a side operation out of Gulfport. 3 months of skimming what wasn't his to skim. The coast found out the way the coast finds everything out. Quiet, certain, and without giving anyone a chance to spin. The Bayou call collection on a Wednesday. I was in Mobile when the word came through the circuit. By Thursday, Antoine was gone from Gulfport. The way things disappear on the coast without announcement, without verdict. When the Bayou calls collection, every debt comes due. South Coast don't run tabs forever. What you owe is what you do. The arrangement holds as long as everyone holds their end. And when somebody slips, the Bayou calls collection again. Know the brass on the back road, second line for the falling. Collection time on the Gulf Coast, no exception. strip to hide. I don't run collection the way the movies say collection runs. No violence for the sake of making the point. The arrangement already made. The coast collects through exclusion, through the velvet rope that doesn't open, through the name that stops moving on the circuit and dies. I've seen Hardeman and Antoine dissolve when a reputation left them the South Coast without your name. It's just geography and heat. And the heat on Beach Boulevard in August with no name behind you is a different kind of heat than the heat was standing when the Bayou calls collection. It calls your whole life's ledger, not just the money. The moves you made when nobody was watching, the way you treated the women in your operation, the way you honored or dishonored the code that this coast runs on. Marlene knew before I did that Antoine was going. The way she went quiet in the week before the circuit found out she had that particular stillness that meant she'd already done the math. And the math that come out the way bad math always does, ugly and final. When the Bayou calls collection, every debt comes due. South Coast don't run tab forever. What you owe is what you do. The arrangement holds as long as everyone holds their end. And when somebody slips, the Bayou calls collection again. Know the brass on the back row, second line for the fallen. Collection time on the Gulf Coast, no exceptions, no stalling. Pay what you owe or pay another way. The coast decides. When the Bayou calls collection, there's nowhere on this strip to hide. I run my house clean because I watch what dirty costs. I keep my word because I watch what broken word takes from a man. The South Coast is the most honest place I've ever lived because it enforces its accounting with the patience of the Gulf itself. But when the Bayou calls collection, it's not always money, it's not always loud. Sometimes it's just the tide going out and not coming back in. For the man who thought the tide was his to schedule. Pay on time, hold your end, keep the arrangement clean. That's the gospel the South Coast preaches to the ones who last. And the ones who don't keep the gospel eventually provide the lesson that the coast uses to teach the ones who come after.
Sirens don't stop for Sunday on Florida Avenue. Sirens don't stop for Sunday on Florida Avenue. They cut right through the organ plant at 3rd Baptist. Right through the pastor's second point in his 3-point sermon. Right through Missy Vaugh's closed eyes and folded hands. The congregation has learned to hear both at once. Has learned to hold the sacred and the secular in the same moment. The siren is not an interruption, it is part of the service. The church down here learned to worship inside what it cannot stop. I sat in the back pew of 3rd Baptist in September '96. The week after what happened to Derrick became official news. Derrick, who drew maps on the sidewalk, who knew the shape of Brazil, who the corner found at 15, who the system finished before 22. His mother sat in the front pew, Mrs. Estelle James, a woman who had been attending this church for 31 years, who had prayed over her son every single morning of his life, and whose prayers were answered in every way except the one that mattered most. Sirens don't stop for Sunday. They went past 3 times during the service. Each time the congregation absorbed the sound without losing the thread. This is what surviving requires, the capacity to hold both, to not let the siren end the service even when the siren is about yours. The pastor said, we mourn Derrick James taken too soon. We mourn what he could have been. And I wanted to stand up and say, he already was something. He was Derrick, the chalk maps, the library. He already was something before the something the corner made him into. But I
sat in the back pew and held my peace, because the church has its own grammar and I'm a guest in it. Because Mrs. Estelle James did not need my theology interrupting her 31 years of this particular sanctuary. The house on Florida Avenue that was Derrick's mother's house still stands as of the last time I drove past it. The sidewalk where the chalk maps were has been repaved twice, but the sidewalk remembers what chalk maps know, which is everything. Sirens don't stop for Sunday, and the South Coast doesn't stop for grief. The South Coast keeps requiring from the people who remain in it, keeps requiring presence and rent and showing up, keeps requiring that you be functional while you are also broken. Miss Yvonne came to the repast at the James house after the service, brought food that didn't need explanation, the kind of food that is itself the language. The deacon from 3rd Baptist brought his quiet in his presence. The neighborhood brought itself, which is what neighborhoods do when they know how. This is the other South Coast story, the one underneath the headlines, that every loss is also absorbed by something that keeps holding, that the kitchen door stays open, that the deacon keeps his presence, that the woman in the front pew comes back the following Sunday. Sirens don't stop for Sunday, but the Sunday keeps going, keeps holding the people who hold the people who are gone, keeps being the institution that the institution failed to be, keeps being the grammar that names what policy cannot name. I left Florida Avenue that Sunday and drove to the shore, stood at the Gulf, the way I always stand there when I need the scale to change. And the Gulf was moving the way it always moves, without opinion. And I told it about Derrick, about the maps, about the chalk, about the rain. And the Gulf kept moving, which is not indifference. It is the sound of something too large to be small about what it holds. It holds the Tuesday burials and the Sunday sirens, and the chalk maps of countries, and the kitchen door, and all of it. Sirens don't stop for Sunday, but Sunday doesn't stop either. And that is the South Coast truth that keeps me standing, in a geography that has cost everything and refuses to be finished.
The neon says vacancy, and it means more than one thing on this strip. Every letter in that sign is a sermon, if you know the congregation. Bayside, Motor Court, Beach Haven, Blue Gulf Lodge. The names don't matter as much as the light they cast on the asphalt. Room 1114 has a story that the carpet holds. Room 118 has a window that faces the service road. I know every room on this strip, the way a preacher knows his pews. Which ones hold the faithful and which ones hold the questioning. The operation moves at night, the way the shrimp boats move at night. Not because anything's wrong, because that's when the water's right. The Gulf doesn't stop running business when the sun goes down, and neither do we, because the Gulf teaches the school we attend. She came through the door at 9 with that particular tie, the kind of tie that isn't weakness, it's logistics. The kind of tie that means the night went long and productive, and productivity on the South Coast has its own weight. I had the room or the cold water towel lamp on low. The motel neon bled through the curtain in 3 colors: pink, blue, green, painting the ceiling like a slow cathedral where the gospel is the hum of a window unit in summer. This is the sermon that nobody transcribes. What it costs to keep the arrangement beautiful. How much goes into making effortless look effortless. The accounting that happens in rooms that don't make the brochure. Charlene runs the night desk here on Wednesdays and Thursdays. She's been on this strip for 11 years, longer than me. She hands me the room key without making it a ceremony. That's respect. That's how respect moves on the South Coast. The neon sermon preaches what the Boulevard can't say out loud, that this life is not glamour, it's geometry, angles, and timing, and knowing when to stay still, and knowing most of all when to move and at what speed. I put 2 decades into learning this geometry, starting from rooms I couldn't afford to the ones I keep reserved. The Motel strip on Beach Boulevard was my first classroom, and then every night I still teach myself something it didn't cover. She put the count on the nightstand without me asking, because that's how we operate. The ass became unnecessary 2 years in. I checked it once, the way you check your phone when you already know who called. The number was right, the number is always right. That's what the South Coast builds. People who don't need to be watched, because the arrangement built them better than surveillance could. The trust is in the craft, not in the oversight. And the craft is in the knowing, not the telling. Motel, neon on the Gulf Coast in August, when the heat hangs in the parking lot like something that forgot to leave. The sermon is still running at 2 in the morning, and the congregation knows every word by the 3rd verse. This is the life that looks a certain way from Beach Boulevard. It looks entirely different from room 1114. I've seen it from both sides, and I'll tell you true, beauty is real, and so is everything hiding behind it. The neon keeps its sermon through the night. Pink, blue, green, pink again. The rotation never stops. And out on the Gulf, the shrimp boats are reading their own signals, the same way we read ours. Patient, practiced, and moving.
Summertime in the ninth ward. Look. Summertime in the ninth ward is its own country, with its own rules, its own flag, its own economy. The kind of economy that doesn't show up in any report, but keeps 600 families breathing when the month runs long. Mr. Earl fixes cars in the driveway on Florida Avenue. 3 generations of hands that know every engine on this block. His daughter Latoya does hair on Saturdays out of the kitchen. $8 a head, appointments by showing up early and being patient. The ice cream man comes down Claiborne at 4 in the afternoon. Knows every child's name and how their mama takes a coffee. This is what the outside world doesn't understand about this place. That the knowledge is deep, that the care is specific, that the people are not statistics. Summertime in the night ward smells like humidity and cut grass. Smells like someone's crawfish boil on a Wednesday, no occasion needed. Smells like the creek that runs behind the Desire housing project. Smells like what survival looks like when it still has its dignity. We knew how to find food when the refrigerator was honest with us. Who on the block would feed you without making it a charity? Who had a garden in the back that gave more than one family? The informal network of survival that nobody gets credit for sustaining. Just used to run a domino game on St. Claude on Friday nights. Kept it clean, kept it fair, nobody left owing what they couldn't pay. He understood that the game is a social institution, not just a way to pass the evening, but a way to keep the peace intact. The deacon at 3rd Baptist ran a discretionary fund from his own pocket when the collection plate wasn't enough. Called it emergency bridge like it was a bureaucratic process, because dignity requires a language that doesn't sound like pity. Summertime in the ninth ward. Before the 90s turned, before mandatory minimum started taking the fathers, before crack had finished doing what crack was designed to do to a community that didn't design the system that designed the drug. We were poor in the ninth ward, let's be clear about that. Poor is not a character flaw. Poor is a condition with causes, and the causes of ninth ward. Poor in 1991, had addresses in Washington and Baton Rouge, not on Florida Avenue. But this track isn't about the causes right now. It's about the life that existed inside the condition. About how much warmth the community generates when it decides that everyone in it is worth the effort. Mr. Earl's hands on an engine at 7 in the morning. Latoya's hands in somebody's hair on Saturday. The deacon's hand in his own wallet on a Tuesday when nobody was looking. Miss Yvonne's kitchen door open as always without announcement. Yep, this is the summertime in the ninth ward that I carry. The one that taught me everything I know about what community actually means. Not the word on the sign, not the word in the speech, but the practice of it daily. Expensive and never for the cameras. Summertime, and we were full even when the refrigerator lied. Summertime, and we were whole even when the systems denied it. Summertime, summertime, and the night ward before the autumn that came and changed everything except the people who stayed and kept building.
Pier 9 creaks like it's been holding weight a long time. Salt-eating boards and a railing that trusts faith more than steel. The kind of place where serious conversations happen because the water below was too loud for anyone to overhear. She was already there when I arrived, already knowing that's how Marlene operated, always ahead of the scene. 7 years on the Gulf Coast circuit had given her that, the instinct to arrive first and own the geography. I ordered coffee from the stand at the pier head. Black, no sugar, the Gulf doesn't need to be sweeter. She watched me walk toward her with the eyes of a woman who has evaluated men for a living and stopped being surprised. Marlene, I said. She didn't smile, didn't move, just let the cigarette speak for a few seconds of silence. I know why you're here, she said finally, and I haven't decided if I care yet. That's the opening. That's where the negotiation lives. Not in the numbers, not in the terms, but in the space between what I know you need and what you haven't admitted you're willing to give. Pier 9 is sunset, jazz from somewhere inland floating out. Horn low on the water like it's looking for somewhere to land. This is where the South Coast makes its offers and the key of whatever the Gulf decides to play tonight. Marlene was 32 and looked like 32 had been honest with her. Not kind, honest, the way the Gulf is honest. It shows you exactly what it is and lets you decide if you're strong enough to be part of its arrangement. She asked me what I was offering besides the obvious. I told her the obvious ain't what I came to offer. What I came to offer was position, a geography, a structure, a name that means something south of I-10. The pier held us both without comment. 1,000 conversations had been had on these boards before. The wood had absorbed enough propositions to know that most of them end in one of two ways and neither one is clean. She looked at the water a long time, the kind of looking that means the decision is already made and what follows is just a ceremony of getting there. The jazz from inland found its way to us again. Horn lines through the salt air like a language for what words can't hold. What I'm offering, I said quietly, is protection and precision. I run a clean operation, Gulf Coast to Gulf Coast, and I need someone who understands the territory before they enter it. Marlene dropped a cigarette, let it fall to the water between the boards below. Watched it long enough to see what happened to things you release here. Then she turned to me and said, "Tell me the terms." Tell me the terms. That's where it changed. That's where the Pier 9 proposition became something real. The Gulf kept moving underneath us while we talked. The way the Gulf always moves, unconcerned, immense patience. She left before me, walking back toward the motel strip. Her heels on a pier board sounding like a slow count. I stayed a while longer, watched the last of the sunset go down behind the water like a deal God made with the dart. The jazz from inland had quit by then, leaving just the Gulf and what we put in motion. Pier 9, salt air, a name spoken twice, and the South Coast added one more arrangement to its ledger.
Yeah. Velvet rope on Beach Boulevard. That's ours tonight. South Coast standing, Gulf wind on the collar of my white. Every face I see has been here before. This is the circuit. Biloxi money, Nola blood. Houston roots, Pensacola permit. We don't walk in, we arrive. We don't talk loud, we let the room adjust. The velvet rope knows my name before I say it. That's the geography I built in 15 years of trust. South Coast operator, go from wall to wall. Every room I enter is a stage before the curtain call. Leaning to the ankle gators on the marble floor. This ain't the first time and it won't be the last time at this door. Velvet rope on Beach Boulevard. Let me through. South Coast running, got the boulevard on cue. Every face I see already knows the protocol. We built this on the Gulf and now the Gulf is ours to call. Beach Boulevard on Friday when the casino money moves. The energy lifts off the asphalt like something that refuses to be still. And down at the far end where the velvet keeps its post, that's where the South Coast congregation does its thing most real. Junior Boudreaux holds the rope on weekends. Been doing this 6 years. He knows the names that matter and he lets the names that don't sit at the bar. That's the curation, that's the art of the velvet rope science. Knowing what you're keeping out as much as what you're letting through. We operate on a different frequency than what the tourists see. Beach Boulevard looks one way to the camera and another way to us. We're in the in-between, and the space between was visible in what the South Coast actually runs on after midnight. The women moving through this room are running their own calculations. Math I respect because I know what the variables cost. Every smile, every approach, every careful step across that flow is a decision that somebody with experience made with eyes wide open. Velvet rope on Beach Boulevard. That's ours tonight. South Coast standing up, wind on the collar of my white. Every face I see has been here before. This is the circuit. Biloxi money, Nola blood. Houston roots, Pensacola permit. We don't walk in, we arrive. We don't talk loud, we let the room adjust. The velvet rope knows my name before I say it. That's the geography I built in 15 years of trust. South Coast operator, go from wall to wall. Every room I enter is a stage before the curtain call. Leaning to the ankle gators on the marble floor. This ain't the first time and it won't be the last time at this door. Velvet rope on Beach Boulevard. Let me through. South Coast running, got the boulevard on cue. Every face I see already knows the protocol. We built this on the Gulf and now the Gulf is ours to call. You wanna know the truth about this life of spectacle? The lights are real but they don't light everything they look like they light. It's dark just behind the brightness on Beach Boulevard at 2 in the morning. And I know what's in that dark because I've lived in it and built from it. Marlene was somewhere in this room tonight, I could feel it. The way you feel weather before it arrives on the coast. She moved through these spaces without needing to be visible. That was always a talent present without announcement. I watched the velvet rope hold his line for another hour. Watched the South Coast congregation moving, counting, negotiating. Thought about how long this lasts and whether the velvet rope is a border or a beginning rope on Beach Boulevard. That's all tonight. South Coast standing, Gulf wind on the collar of my white. Every face I see has been here before. This is the circuit. Biloxi money, Nola blood. Houston roots, Pensacola permit. We built this from the Gulf up. We built this from the slow understanding of a coast that doesn't forgive. And tonight is beautiful, and it's ours. And tomorrow the Gulf will still be moving, and we'll still be here. Velvet rope on Beach Boulevard, it's all the night. Velvet Beach Boulevard, it's all the night.
Yeah. She left on a Thursday. No note, no ceremony. The room at the Bayside was clean the way rooms are clean. When someone has had enough time to decide and prepare, not abandoned, vacated, which is worse. I stood on the Gulfside where the pier meets the water. The same water that had been here for every version of this conversation.
The Gulf doesn't move different for anything, it just moves patient, enormous, indifferent to what we bring to its edge. I thought I was different from the men I'd watch lose this. The men who confused the operation with the person who forgot that a woman who chose to be here could choose just as competently to leave. Marlene chose right. That's what I set with Gulfside. Not anger, not the usual reflex of a man who can't sit with what he made. Just a slow recognition that the ledger I've been keeping had a column in it I've been choosing not to read. The organ in the old church off Highway 90 was playing that morning. I could hear it across the parking lot and across the water. Something old and heavy, the kind of hymn that doesn't comfort, it just tells you the truth. It's still the truth regardless. I put 20 years into building a thing that I called a life. And somewhere in the building I confused what I was building. The South Coast institution is real. I stand behind every word I ever said about it. But institutions don't hold you when the morning comes gray and the Gulf is still. Gulfside Reckoning at 50 yards from where the pier boards end, where the water starts and the metaphor stop working. Well, you can't call anything an arrangement anymore because the Gulf doesn't accept that language. What did I actually give in exchange for what I took? The question sat on the shore and wouldn't move with the tide. What did Marlene get from Pier 9 besides a proposition? And what did the proposition cost the person who was already there? The organ across Highway 90 kept its work going. Church women in the best on a Thursday morning, singing to something they believe, still listen. While I stood Gulfside counting what the water couldn't take back. She's somewhere on the circuit, Marlene is somewhere. That's what the code means when the name stops moving through the circuit. Not gone from the earth, just gone from the reach of the arrangement, which in this life is its own particular kind of disappearance. I know this coast from Houston to the Florida line. I know every road that connects every piece of this institution. I know where to find almost anything that belongs to this life. And I know that what I'm standing Gulfside looking for isn't findable. The water takes everything and gives nothing back. I know that now the way you know it from standing inside it. Not from the old man at the bait shop telling you it does, but from being the man at the edge with nothing left to reckon with but yourself. Gulfside, Thursday, the organ's still going. The Gulf's still moving in this patient, ancient way. And somewhere on this coast, Marlene walking away from me. And all of it, the pier, the reckoning, the organ, absolutely right.
The Gulf wind still blows south. That's not a metaphor. It's just one direction in the physics of coastal geography. But I have needed it to be something more than that on certain days. And on those days it has been, which is what I can honestly say. I'm writing this from the South Coast in the year of our specific survival. The Ninth Ward is still here, not unchanged, not healed, but present. The presence of a place that has absorbed extraordinary amounts of damage and continues to show up in the morning and require what morning requires. Miss Yvonne's kitchen door is still open. I need you to know that. She is 67 and the door is still open from 6 in the morning. And whoever shows up hungry still eats without making it an occasion. And I know of no greater statement about what the South Coast is. We were children before the neighborhood named us. I know that now from the other end of the sentence, from the end that knows what naming costs, and knows that the children who were named survived some of it and did not survive some of it. Derrick did not survive it. That's the odds accounting. And what that cost is not something I am finished paying. But I am also not finished being the person who knew Derrick before the corner did. And those two truths live in me side by side without resolution. Jerome Campbell got out in 2003. I heard that through the circuit. Heard he moved to Atlanta. Heard he was doing something in construction. Heard his daughter Amara is studying something at a college in Georgia. That's the information I have, and I'm choosing to believe it's accurate. The Welfare Office on Broad Street is still there. The line still forms at 6:30 in the summer. Miss Yvonne has been in that line enough times to know the caseworkers by their schedules and their approximate kindness. The Gulf wind blows south through all of this, through the open kitchen door and through the closed courtroom, through the 3rd Ward Friday and the 3rd Baptist Sunday, through the chalk sidewalk or a repaved sidewalk in the rain that washed it level. What remains on the South Coast is everything and not enough. What remains is the community that the system tried to administer, and the community that survived being administered, and the community that is still making the decisions the system did not make for it. Latoya is still doing hair. She has a shop now on Canal Street. Mr. Earl's son is running the driveway mechanic operation. The deacon at 3rd Baptist retired, but his fund is still running. Somebody else is running it now with the same discreet vocabulary. This is what the South Coast built in the 90s, despite the 90s. People who know how to hold what they have against pressure. People who open kitchen doors before they know who's coming through. People who come back to the pew the Sunday after the worst Tuesday. We were children before the neighborhood named us, and the naming was real, and the cost of the naming was real, and we are still here. Those of us who are still here, carrying the names and the chalk maps and the kitchen door and the Tuesday burials. The Gulf wind still blows south because wind does what it does, and the South Coast still holds because that is what the South Coast decided. In the face of every decision that was made against it, to keep holding, keep opening the door, keep coming back to the Sunday. I am not gonna tell you it's okay. It is not fully okay. I am not gonna tell you the lesson justified the loss. It did not. I am gonna tell you that the Gulf wind is still blowing south, and Miss Yvonne's kitchen door is still open, and the morning is still arriving. And on certain days that is enough to keep writing the inventory, to keep saying the names, to keep showing up in the place that the place required you to survive.
Hurricane season in Louisiana starts in June, but the hurricane that hit the 9th Ward in '93 had nothing to do with weather. It came from further inland, from courthouses and police precincts and legislation drafted in air conditioning. Mandatory minimums passed in '86, hit us in '91 like compound interest. What looks reasonable in a law office becomes a life sentence at a traffic stop in Orleans Parish, when the stop finds what the stop was looking for, because the stop knew where to look. The first wave fathers the sentencing disparity. 5 grams of crack versus 500 grams of powder. Same drug, different zip code, different courtroom arithmetic. The fathers left the children, watched the mothers held what was left. Hurricane season had nothing to do with weather that year. It was a force without a name that the Weather Channel couldn't track. But everyone in the 9th Ward felt the pressure dropping, felt the walls of the storm forming around them like a diagnosis. Jerome 4.2 grams, he was 22. He had a daughter named Amara. I'm using his name because his name should be used, because 10 years for 4.2 grams should not be anonymous. The second wave economic, the jobs went somewhere else. The industrial South was becoming the post-industrial South, and the post-industrial South didn't have a replacement plan, just a vacancy where the work used to be and a suggestion to adapt. The refinery that used to employ 30 men from Florida Avenue went to automation in the same year Jerome went to Angola. The timing is not a conspiracy. It doesn't need to be a conspiracy. Coincidence can destroy your community as efficiently as intention. Hurricane season had nothing to do with weather that year, but it had to do with choices that other people made in other rooms. Choices that arrived in the 9th Ward, looking like natural disaster, looking like the community had done this to itself. That's the third wave, the narrative. Who gets to explain the storm when the news comes to the 9th Ward? It comes with its frame and a symbol, looking for the image that confirms the explanation that was already written before the camera arrived, before anyone here was asked. I'm trying to be the camera that shows up without the frame, and to say here is what happened, here is what caused it, here is who decided, and here is the community that existed before the decisions, and here is the community that is still here after them battered but here. Hurricane season had nothing to do with weather. It had to do with policy executed at scale against a specific geography. And the geography was not random. The geography was chosen. The way flood maps are drawn with full knowledge of who drowns. So, Missy Bond's kitchen door was still open through all of it. That's the part that doesn't make it into the framing. That the kitchen door was still open through the crack years and through the mandatory minimums and through the economic collapse. The community is not the storm. The community survived the storm. And the storm was not weather. The storm was a decision. And the decision was made by people with addresses. And the addresses are in the public record, if you wanna look. Don't let nobody tell you this is new. The South Coast been running this institution since before the railroads, before the casinos and the tourist maps, before the word for it existed in polite conversation. They call it different things depending on who's talking in the boardrooms. They call it leverage and asset management. On Beach Boulevard, they call it what it is. And what it is has been here since the first ship came through. The institution is rules, don't let them tell you it don't. First rule, know your geography before you plant your flag. You don't operate in Biloxi the way you operate in New Orleans. Every city on this coast has its own dialect of the arrangement. Second rule, the transaction is not the relationship. The transaction is just a door. What matters is what's behind it. Trust, built slow on the South Coast, is the only trust that holds. The Gulf has no patience for rushed foundations. The women in this life are not the product, that's the understanding that separates the operator from the fool. The women in this life are the operation, and the wise man treats his operation with the care it requires. Old man Devereaux sat on his porch in Mobile for 40 years, never left the parish, never needed to. The parish came to him. He said, son, the institution runs on reputation before it runs on anything. Build your name like you're building something that outlives you. I took that to the Gulf Coast, spread it from Houston to Pensacola, built a name that moved on the wind. The way salt moves on the wind, you don't see it, you don't touch it, but everything it lands on carries it forward, whether it means to or not. Gulf Coast institution, older than the men who work it, deeper than the money that flows through it. The arrangement understands itself even when the participants don't. The coast runs the Mac before the Mac runs the coast. There are men who come down here thinking they invented something. You can see them on Beach Boulevard. Too loud, too fast, too new. The Gulf humbles them without moving. The
same way the Gulf humbles hurricanes. It absorbs, it continues. I learned my institution from patience and observation, from sitting in the back of establishments and watching the math, watching how the room tilts when the right person enters, how a name spoken quietly does more than a name shouted from the roof. The women I work with chose this geography the same way I chose it. Marlene chose Pier 9 before I ever pulled into town. The institution was already in her hands when I arrived. I just offered to hold the other end of what she was already carrying. But Gulf Coast institution, the tide knows when to come in. The tide knows when to pull back and wait. Every man down here who lasts beyond his first season learned to watch the tide before he watched anything else. From the third ward to the Bayou mouth, from the Bayou mouth to the Panhandle Pines, the institution flows like the water that names this coast. Slow, heavy, and too deep to stop by standing in its way. Understand, this isn't the corner, this is the corridor. This isn't the block, this is the 1,000-mile arrangement. From the smell of the refineries to the smell of the Gulf, one long institution that the South Coast built to last. And I am not its owner. Nobody owns the institution. I am its student, its practitioner, its careful tenant, paying rent in the currency of patience and precision on a coast that has been collecting that rent since before my grandfather's name. Pelicans know they fly the coast every morning. Low over the water, reading what the surface doesn't show. They see what the tourists photograph and what the tourists don't. The bottom tier lives where the Pelican looks, not where the camera points. South Coast got two economies running parallel. One shows up in the casino annual report, one shows up in the ledger that the coroner keeps. And the Pelican knows both, flying low over all of it. This is for the ones who don't have a name on the circuit, who don't have a man with a reputation standing between them and the worst, who work the strip without the architecture that keeps the worst at bay. The bottom tier, every coast has one. The Gulf Coast keeps a long one. Keisha was working up Pensacola Strip before she was old enough to know what it costs to have no institution around you in this life. I saw her outside the Budget King Motel off Route 98. Somebody had done what happens when there's no one standing between. The Pelican brief is what the coast write for the ones that forgets, not in paper, in absences, and names that stop coming up, in desk clerks who stop asking questions, in rooms that stay clean a little too quickly after a long night. This is the part nobody wants to say out loud about the South Coast gospel, that the institution I built and praised and walked through in fine leather only covers the people with enough standing to be covered, and the bottom tier catches what the institution doesn't reach. The arrangement protects those inside it, and the arrangement doesn't care about those outside. That's not a justification, that's a confession. At maximum volume on a Tuesday morning with nothing left to perform. Keisha's name didn't move through the circuit, nobody called collection, nobody held the rope and said this name means something on this coast. And that's what I'm standing Gulfside Reckoning with, and the gap between the institution I built and the institution I needed to build. South Coast got Pelicans for its witnesses, low flying, salt beating, reading everything the water hides. They don't distinguish between the operator in linen and the girl outside the Budget King with no one standing for her. And maybe that's the final brief. The Pelicans report that the Gulf Coast gospel, as I wrote it, had a missing testament, a chapter I skipped because it was inconvenient for the story I was telling. And inconvenient chapters are the ones that end up being the whole book. I'm not inside this album anymore to be celebrated. I'm inside it because the South Coast deserves an honest ledger, and the honest ledger has Keisha on it, has every name that moved through here without protection on it. When the Pelican flies low over Beach Boulevard at dawn, it doesn't know the difference between the velvet rope and the Budget King. It sees the coast, all of it, the whole arrangement from above, and what it sees is what I'm trying to say. Every name matters, or no names matter. Every arrangement has to account for the bottom, or it accounts for nothing. The Gulf Coast gospel needs a New Testament, and this is me starting to write it at the top of the third act. Pelicans know they fly the coast every morning, reading what the surface hides from the ones who only look from land. The bottom tier is real, the bottom tier has names, and the South Coast owes them a reckoning that goes deeper than mine.
dawn breaks different on the South Coast after a long night. The Gulf turns the color of something that's been through an argument and survived. The Pelicans are already out there reading the surface, like they never stopped, like the night I carried didn't change their protocol. I'm sitting on the seawall at Biloxi with coffee and a quiet that feels different from the quiet I came here with. This quiet has been through the Gulfside Reckoning, through Pier 9, through Marlene, through Keisha's name on the ledger. The old man at the bait shop was right, and more right than he knew. The water takes everything and gives nothing back. But I've been sitting here since the light started, and I want to revise that, because what the water takes, it takes permanently, and permanence is honest. What I lost in this life, the things the water has, those were real. Marlene was real, the proposition at Pier 9 was real. The years of institution and geography and name building were real. And the thing that makes the Gulf honest is it doesn't pretend they weren't. I'm not here to claim I came out of this clean. Nobody comes out of the South Coast clean who went in deep. But I'm here to say that the dawn on Biloxi shores does something to a man that the night didn't get to finish. The gospel I was writing, I need to write a different chapter. Not throw out what was there, but add the testament that was missing. Every arrangement needs to account for the ones it doesn't cover, or it isn't an arrangement. It's just a zone of comfort for the comfortable. Marlene is somewhere on this coast doing what she chose to do after Pier 9. I hope she chose better than Pier 9. I hope the coast she chose afterward was one that she built for herself without any man's proposition in the middle. That's not remorse. That's respect arriving 15 years late. Keisha's name is on the ledger, now in the way it should have been from the start. In the ledger I carry inside the institution I say I run. Every arrangement I make from here forward asks first, who is this protecting, and who is it leaving outside the rope? The South Coast doesn't change because I change. The institution will keep running the way it ran before I arrived. The velvet rope on Beach Boulevard will keep doing its work, and the water will keep taking what it takes, because that's what water does. One man on the seawall at Biloxi in the early light, with coffee and a quiet that has been through something and survived, can add a page to the ledger that the coast never added for itself. And maybe that's the only thing that has ever changed anything down here. The water takes everything and gives nothing back, but the water also holds what we give it, permanently without argument. And I gave it a season of reckoning that I can't take back. And the Gulf held it the way it holds everything, quietly and with no comment. Dawn at Biloxi shores, Pelicans reading the surface, shrimp boats coming in, and me adding the missing testament to the gospel I was writing. The South Coast will outlast me the way the Gulf outlasts everything. What I was will become part of what the coast carries, and I want what I added to its ledger to be better than what I came here with. Marlene, wherever the coast is running for you now, may it be assured that you named yourself. May the velvet rope be your hand on the door, and may the water give you back more than it took. The water takes everything and gives nothing back. I know that now the way you know it when you've let it, but I also know that the giving is our part, and the tide I leave behind is mine to make sure it's worth receiving. The corner of Florida, and Desire remembers Derrick. Not the Derrick that ended up in the newspaper, the Derrick before that. The chalk map one, the library one, the one who knew the shape of Brazil before he knew what shapes caused. Corners remember different than people do. Corners don't forget the before, they hold it. Like the concrete holds the temperature of summer afternoons, long after the children who played there have become other things.
I grew up with Derrick, 2 grades apart at Harriet Tubman Elementary. He was the quiet one who moved in the world like he was always thinking forward. I used to ask him where he was going in his head, and he pointed the sky like the answer was up there if I just learned to look in the right direction. The summer he turned 15, the corner found him first. The summer I was watching, I saw what the corner offered that we couldn't. It offered structure in a place where structure had been stripped away. Offered belonging in a place where belonging requires something to prove. Crack cocaine came to the 9th ward with the patience of arithmetic. Not a single dramatic arrival, but a slow accumulation. The same way floodwater rises incrementally, then suddenly. And by the time you name the emergency, it's already interior. Derrick's father was gone before Derrick could remember him being there. The information I have on this is secondhand. I piece it from corners, from things people said carefully around it, not directly. The way you talk about a wound that's still working its way to the surface. I wanna be careful with this because Derrick was not a symbol, but Derrick was a person with a specific laugh and specific handwriting who drew specific maps of specific countries he was going to visit. And I wanna be careful not to make his dying into a lesson about the drug war. But the drug war is where Derrick died, that's also true. And the drug war was not something Derrick chose from a list of options. The drug war was something that chose a zip code and a generation. And Derrick was in the zip code and in the generation, and that was the selection. The corner of Florida and desire holds his name in its concrete, in the way that corners hold everything silently, without interpretation. The chalk is long gone, the library books he loved are still there, somewhere on a shelf where some other kid's hands might find them. I went back to that corner in '97, 2 years after. Stood there in the November cold, like I was waiting for something to resolve. The corner didn't offer resolution. Corners aren't built for that. They're built for standing on, which is what I did until it was enough. What Derrick drew on that sidewalk before the rain came was a world bigger than the one the 9th ward showed him. And what I wanna say about that, what I've been trying to say for 20 years, is that the world he drew was real, and the one that took him was the mistake. Corners that remember Derrick remember him right. The boy before the boy the drug war made a statistic of. The chalk map cartographer of Florida Avenue, who looked at the sky when you asked him where he was going. And the sky, as far as I can tell, still holds him, in the way that skies hold everything we release to them, in the way that the 9th ward holds everything it loses, heavy, permanent, and refusing to let the loss become the whole story. Yeah. Before the projects knew our names, we were just children, running the parking lot barefoot in July heat. The asphalt hot enough to make your feet remember, but we were too young to care what the ground was keeping. Mama used to sit on the stoop with Miss Yvonne on evenings. 2 women talking low while the street lights came on slow. We didn't know then what they were solving in those whispers. We just knew the sound of it meant we were still safe. The 9th ward and summer smelled like rain before it came, like hot asphalt in somebody's barbecue 3 doors down. Like the river if the wind was right, like honeysuckle from the fence, like everything that means your whole world is
6 square blocks. We were children before the neighborhood named us, before the corners handed out the titles nobody chose, before the police learned our faces, before we learned our faces, when our names were just our names and not a category. Derrick used to draw on the sidewalk with chalk his mama bought, maps of places he'd seen in library books, Brazil, Tokyo, Rome. He knew every country by shape before he knew what shapes caused, before the chalk ran out and the rain came and washed it all level. Miss Yvonne used to feed whoever showed up hungry. Didn't matter whose child, didn't matter if you knocked or just appeared. Her kitchen door stayed open from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. A policy she never renounced, just kept like breathing. The projects in those years were not what the news made them, or they were, but they were also this. Children in chalk and barbecue smoking, 2 women on the stoop solving what they could while the street lights came on. The city moved around us like water. We were children before the neighborhood named us, before the summer started counting different counting laws, before a boy who drew maps on sidewalks became a corner, and the corner became a ledger, and the ledger became a scar. I wanna go back to the July when none of that had happened yet. Not to change it, you can't change what the 90s had already decided, but just to stand in it again, barefoot on hot asphalt, and feel what it was to be unnamed and light and full. The parking lot held all of us in those evenings, held the sounds of children who didn't know yet what was coming, held the smoke and the whispers in the open kitchen door, held the chalk maps of countries Derrick was going to see. We were children before the neighborhood named us, before anyone taught us to be afraid of what we already were. Miss Yvonne's door was open and the street light was on, and that was the whole world, and the whole world was enough. I carry that July everywhere I've ever been since. Carry it the way you carry something too fragile to put down. Carry the asphalt and the chalk and the barbecue and the stoop, 'cause what came after is real. And so was this. Before the projects knew our names, we were just children. And the children we were didn't know to say goodbye to the July that was ending without announcing it, to the chalk maps in the rain, to the open door, to the light.
The Gulf is wide and the night leans heavy on the water. Spanish Mars hanging low like it's tired of holding secrets. I came in from Houston on a 2-lane road that narrows down to nothing. The radio lost its signal somewhere past Port Arthur. This ain't a city, it's a coast with a conscience that quit. Salt in the air, it's different when the money moves slow. Like Brett standing in the shallows like sentinels, nobody higher. Pelicans gliding low, reading the surface for what it won't show.
The water takes everything and gives nothing back.
That's what the old man at the bait shop told me at dusk. I laughed, tipped my hat, kept moving south, but the words stayed with me like a hook I couldn't shake loose. Marlene was leaning on the railing when I first pulled in. Pier 9 salt bleach wood, a cigarette burning patient, a dress with the color of Gulf water just before a storm. And she looked through me like she'd already seen my type come and go. The Bayou Entrance is a welcome and a warning in one. Honeysuckle sweet with something underneath that bites. If you only come to see the surface, you'll leave thinking it's paradise. Ask the ones who stayed, they'll tell you paradise was the con. I checked into the motel on Beach Boulevard that night. The neon hummed the frequency, only night owls recognized the man at the desk. Gave me the key without looking up, already knew which room I need, they always do them. Outside the window the Gulf stretched black and permanent, a kind of dark that doesn't argue.
just waits for you to understand that down here the rules were written in sand before the tide came in. And whatever the tide left behind, that's what we built our lives on.
The water takes everything and gives nothing back.
I thought about that as I watched the lights of a shrimp boat disappear out past where I could follow into the flat black muffin. Like everything beautiful in this life, it moves away and keeps moving. But I didn't come to the Gulf to mourn what the water takes. I came to learn the language of what stays, and what stays on the south coast is not what you put in a postcard. What stays is the arrangement, silent, old, understood. Every motel window has a story lit behind it. Every neon sign is a sermon if you know how to hear it. The gospel of the Gulf Coast is not written in churches. It's written in a ledger that lives in the back room of everything. Marlene finished a cigarette, let it fall into the water below. Watched it float a moment before the Gulf swallowed it whole. She looked at me like she was doing math I couldn't see. And the Bayou Entrance hummed its welcome underneath us both.
Takes everything and gives nothing back.
I know that now the way you know weather before it comes. Standing on the shore where the sand meets what you can't control.
This is where it starts.